This is William Michael, the headmaster of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this talk I'd like to explain how men and women can assist in the work of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy through grading student assignments. This simple work is a crucial part of the mission of restoring classical Catholic education, and it needs to be looked at and undertaken in a way that's very different from what is done in modern schools. In the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, we make great use of written assignments. We do this because written assignments allow students to practice a number of important study skills. It prevents cheating, and it allows us to enjoy and develop a relationship with other students that helps to cultivate the intellectual culture of classical Catholic studies. When our students complete an assignment in the academy, it's the beginning of a conversation. Ideally, if the student works diligently and follows the instructions and pursues the true ends of the lesson, he or she can make that a short conversation because that student can answer the questions with such quality and completeness that there's not much that needs to be said. And that's always the goal in submitting an assignment, to demonstrate one's understanding of the lesson in one shot. That's the goal for students. But for those who are serving as tutors, our job is to try and discern what's keeping the student from being able to demonstrate mastery of the lesson, provide some brief but helpful feedback, and be willing to continue to review and grade assignments until mastery is achieved, or I should say, until mastery is demonstrated. So we have goals in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy with respect to grading assignments that are not maintained in modern schools. In modern schools, normally teachers assign work to students, the students do the work, and then the students get a grade for that assignment. The assignments are used as tests to rank the children and put grades into a grade book. The assignments are not used to lead each individual child to mastery. But in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, our goal is not to fill a grade book with grades or to rank and sort our students, but to help each one of them reach mastery, because we don't teach anything in the academy that's not important, that shouldn't be learned and mastered by our students. There's no busy work. We want to help our students master every lesson in every course. That requires a great deal of sacrifice and work on the part of tutors, which is why modern schools don't do it. So when a student submits an assignment for review, we look at that assignment as the beginning of a conversation, hopefully a brief conversation, but possibly a lengthy conversation. And we're willing as tutors to engage in that conversation and go back and forth with a student until he's able to demonstrate understanding of the lesson. Now we face some more challenges today because of technology, because many will be tempted to use modern tools to cheat and try to fake it through schoolwork just to get desired grades. The tools that are available to students are very powerful, and they have their proper place in our lives. But when it comes to education, especially when they're used dishonestly, they don't have a place in the completion of assignments. And we've got to make sure that we don't leave our students subject to temptation by creating assignments that are easy to cheat on, that can easily be completed by the use of modern tools. And this is why the assessments that I create in the academy are often much more open-ended than modern school assignments. Simple comprehension questions that ask for information. For example, in a biology class, to ask a student, what is a paramecium, allows for a quick Google search and an answer. And that's really not what we're looking for. We're not asking a student if he can find the definition of a paramecium. And so the assignments that we create in the academy have to take the goals of study into consideration. And again, modern schools don't do this. Cheating is rampant in modern schools, and it's rampant for one very simple reason. The teachers in the schools allow it. That's why cheating is rampant. The objectives are low, the standards are low, the assignments are the kind of assignments that really aren't proper for education, and that's what makes cheating possible. And then the students are rewarded for cheating with good grades, and this makes the temptation to cheat very strong for modern students. It's the school's fault. They allow what have to be considered normal temptations for children to become much more influential by the apparent success that they offer to those children. And we have to prevent that in order to help our students. We have to make those temptations weaker by making cheating ineffective in the academy, and that requires that tutors learn how to grade assignments differently. Now, we use a grading system in the academy that's very simple, but it takes some time to get used to, and tutors have to realize that they come into assignments as adults, sometimes with great learning, sometimes with hypocritical standards and expectations, and all of these things need to be subjected to the context of what we're doing. When we grade a student assignment, we've got to remind ourselves of the goal of the assignment. It's not merely to find the right answer. The assignments have instructions that are intended to lead students to fulfill certain objectives. And when we grade student work, we've got to consider whether those objectives are being satisfied. We focus on 3 criteria when we review student work in the academy. The first criterion is accuracy. We evaluate student work to determine whether or not questions are answered accurately. The question of accuracy is not based on the tutor's opinions on any subject. They're not based on a tutor's previous learning or experience in a subject. Accuracy is judged entirely by the text studied by the student. So when we consider accuracy, we're asking, does the student's answer accurately demonstrate a knowledge of the text? That's the only standard for an assignment. And tutors have to be very careful not to bring their own opinions, prior learning, outside knowledge, and so on to a topic. They should make sure that they study the lesson themselves, they review the lesson to have in mind what the lesson presents to the student, and then evaluate the student work and judge whether it's accurate based on the content of the text and nothing else. So that's the first criterion. The second criterion is completeness. It's one thing to be accurate, it's another thing to be complete, or to be accurate for all questions. So we look at the entire assignment and everything that was assigned in the assignment, and we evaluate whether or not the student has followed the instructions and completed the assignment. A student is responsible to answer every question on an assignment. So if there are 12 questions and a student answers 11 and leaves one blank, he does not satisfy the completion criterion, because it's not up to students to determine which questions are important and which aren't important. And often, students judge the difficult questions, the challenging questions, to be the ones that they're not going to answer. So they'll often answer simple, easy content questions and then leave a reflection question unanswered or lazily answered. And therefore, just as important as accuracy is completeness. And so we evaluate whether the student has completed the assignment. And then thirdly, we evaluate honesty. We evaluate whether the student has completed the assignment honestly. Now, the student is instructed to answer the questions and complete the lesson based on the content of the lesson. The student is instructed to base all answers on the content of the text assigned in the lesson. The student is instructed to complete the assignment after carefully studying the lesson. Therefore, if a student resorts to other means of completing an assignment by using the internet, by looking things up, Googling a topic, or just answering off the top of his head, rather than from the lesson text, those are, if not incomplete, dishonest responses. Because the student is agreeing that he has studied the lesson and that he's answering the questions based on his study of the lesson, and that all of the content in his answers is his own from his own studies. And this is quite easy to evaluate, because when we're working with students, we can quickly recognize when a student is pulling information from outside sources. And this is why it's especially important for tutors to know the text themselves. It's also why it's important for students and tutors to use specific editions of translations and works, so it can be seen that answers on assignments are being taken from the student's reading and not from outside sources. So these three criteria need to be evaluated for each assignment: accuracy, completeness, and honesty. And we give a simple score to an assignment based on our evaluation of these 3 criteria. And we give only one of 4 scores to a student. So we don't have to hair split and decide whether it's a 78 or an 84, which is really modern school nonsense. And we don't need to develop some kind of complex grading rubric for every assignment. Because these numbers, when we get down into the individual points and grades, it's really arbitrary and silly. There are 4 basic grades that a student can receive when he submits an assignment. The first grade would be a perfect score, which is a 100. A perfect score means that the 3 criteria, accuracy, completeness, and honesty, are very evident for the assignment. So if we see that all of the questions have been answered, the assignment is complete, the information in the answers is accurate relative to the text assigned for study, and it appears very evident that the student's work is honest, then that student receives a perfect score for that assignment. And as I said before, the conversation between the student and the tutor is very brief. We don't even need to give any feedback, just assign a 100. And that tells the student that we've found the work done on that assignment to be accurate, complete, and honest. The second grade possible is a 75. A 75 is a passing grade for the assignment, and that means that the assignment looks pretty good. It seems that the student has studied the lesson. It seems that the student has pretty decent grasp of the content of the lesson, but something is not accurate, something is not complete, or it may appear that something was not done honestly. And so we would give a 75 for any assignment that needs some more work before it can be considered complete and perfect. We give a 75 and we offer some feedback to explain why we judge the assignment as a 75. And this feedback should be very brief. It should simply identify the problem so the student can review the lesson, improve his work on the assignment, and resubmit it. And it's important for me to comment on feedback. Many students and parents will try to take advantage of assignment grading. They will try to put the burden on the tutor and try to use the tutor to help the student complete the lesson. So what a student will do is submit a poorly done assignment. And they'll submit it just for the sake of starting this conversation. And they'll look for detailed feedback from the tutor that essentially gives them the answers and tells them what they need to know to complete the assignment. And we will never give that information to our students. The students have to do the work. And so we need to be careful when we give feedback that we don't allow students to use tutors to do the work for them. When a student asks me a question about one of the questions on an assignment, I tell the student that question is intended for you to test your knowledge of the lesson. That question is not for the tutor to test the tutor's knowledge. You need to study that question and you need to demonstrate your knowledge by answering that question based on the lesson. That's your job. That's the purpose of this assignment, to find out whether you can do so. And tutors have to be careful that they don't end up answering questions for students and being used by students to get work done, which is another kind of academic dishonesty. We want students who work to be rewarded, and we want students who are not willing to work to not be rewarded. And so we have to be careful that the feedback we provide simply explains why we chose not to give an assignment a perfect score and sends a student back to review the lesson, to continue studying, and try again. We're never going to tell the student the answers. The student is going to have to do the work and complete the assignment independently. Now, we may find that there is a question in an assignment or some part of an assignment that is, through our fault, a source of trouble. Let's say a question is asked which assumes some knowledge that actually isn't in the lesson. If we find something like that, we don't want to then provide students with the information. We want to remove that question from the lesson. So if there is a problem and we find that students are always getting the same question wrong, or there's a part of a lesson that's always a stumbling block, we want to evaluate whether our assignment can be improved to eliminate that problem. We don't want to give students answers or explain things, because the most important work we're doing in grading student work is helping children become good students. And if we allow them to lean on tutors and become dependent on help that's not always going to be available to them, we're not helping them to become good independent students. And that's a temptation for tutors who want to show off their knowledge. But that's not what the role of a tutor is. The tutor is the author of the textbook. I should say, the teacher is the author of the textbook. The tutor is a fellow student. In modern society, people who should be working as tutors like to present themselves as teachers. But that's not how the academy works. If we're studying Aristotle, the teacher is Aristotle. And we're all students. If we're studying the Summa Theologica, the teacher is St. Thomas, and we're all students. A tutor is simply someone who has demonstrated understanding of the lessons and is now offering to help other students progress through the lessons and attain quality in his or her studies. So we have to be careful that when we do not give a perfect score to an assignment, that we explain why we didn't give the perfect score, but we don't give answers to the question or do the work for the students. And that takes discipline from tutors. The third possible score is a 50. A 50 is not passing, essentially a failing grade. A 50 means this student has not satisfactorily completed this assignment, should not go on to any other tasks in the lesson or any other lessons in the course, but should remain on the present lesson because more study is needed. The 75 score, as I said, was passing. That means the student can move on in the course or move on to the next task in the lesson and should review and resubmit in order to raise the score. But it's not essential that he does so. He can move on and accept a 75 as a grade for one assignment. A 50, however, tells a student that he may not move on in the course, that he has not demonstrated knowledge of the current lesson and should remain on that assignment and remain on that lesson until improvement is shown, until he earns a score of at least 75. A 50 means that the information is not accurate and or not complete and or not honest. So the key in giving a 75 or a 50 is judging whether a student seems to demonstrate sufficient knowledge to justify moving on in the course, or whether the student would be moving on too soon at that point and needs to take some more time for study. If you feel the student would be moving on too soon and really hasn't demonstrated a knowledge of the lesson, give the student a 50 and tell the student to stop and review. And then lastly, a 25 is for an assignment that's simply not acceptable. It's incomplete, it's not accurate, it's sloppy, careless, just unacceptable work. So there are 4 possible grades for assignments. 100 for a complete assignment that is accurate, complete, and apparently honest. A 75 for an assignment that is, or I should say, that makes evident a student's knowledge of the lesson, but is not perfect and needs some more work in order to be worthy of a perfect score, but is passing and gives the student permission to move on in the course. A 50, which tells a student to stop and review because he's trying to move on too soon. And a 25, when work is simply unacceptable. 4 simple grades to assign to any assignment. Now, the best way to become comfortable with this grading is to receive grades for your own assignments. And that's why it's required that tutors actually be studying in the academy and completing assignments, because usually I'm the one grading the assignments for those who become tutors, and they get used to my grading. They know what it's like to submit an assignment and get a 100. They know what it's like to submit an assignment and get a 75. They know what it's like to redo an assignment to try to raise a grade. They know what it's like to get a 50. And so that experience as a student receiving grades helps you to think of the student when you're giving the grades. And that's why studying in the academy is a prerequisite for any help with grading. Now, as you review student work, what's going to happen is that there are going to be other tutors also reviewing that same student work. So sometimes students will get an evaluation from another tutor. So I may see that a tutor has evaluated a student's assignment, sent it back, let's say as a 50. The student has reviewed the lesson and is resubmitting the assignment. And I happen to be the one who evaluates it the second time. And I judge it to be complete. The importance of this is that when there are multiple tutors reviewing assignments, we have the opportunity to review each other's grades, and it's good for us to be able to communicate about that and try to establish among ourselves some reliable standards for grading. And I'll often contact a tutor and say, you're being too strict with respect to this, or you're not considering the age level of students in this course. You're not considering the fact that students should be allowed to develop their skills through their assignments, that they don't have to have everything right to get a 100 if they're a young student. For example, in Aesop's fables, students are often younger, and they have to answer some questions that require them to identify the moral of the fable and explain how this fable applies to their own life and things like that. And sometimes a tutor who's reviewing will forget that this is the work of a 10-year-old student or a 12-year-old student. For these young children, it's very difficult to identify the moral lessons of fables. And so when we judge the quality of their answers, we've got to take into consideration that this is a course intended for younger students, and we shouldn't expect polished philosophical answers. These are not students who have studied scripture. These are not students who have studied Aristotle's ethics or have worked through the catechism necessarily. Their explanation of moral lessons are going to be basic, and we've got to accept that. We've got to understand that. We're looking to see that they're studying the text. We're looking to see that they're answering the questions completely and that they're showing an effort to think through the lesson and respond intelligently based on what they're reading. We're not looking for polished philosophical essays from elementary school students. And again, it takes some discipline to adjust the standards and to do so for different courses. It's different in a course like classical reasoning, where we've got to be accurate, and it's sometimes a student will try to get into reasoning before he's ready for that course, and he doesn't have the comprehension skills required for an accurate study of Aristotle's text. And rather than try to figure out how to grade that assignment, we need to hit the brakes, and I would recommend that the tutor contact me and suggest that a student may be enrolled in a course that he's not able to handle yet, because then we can contact the parents and recommend a more appropriate course. So the tutors need to be communicating with each other to try and establish fair and consistent standards in evaluation. And that's part of our responsibility in our communication, to establish and develop a really effective, consistent, reasonable evaluation system that we provide for the students, that they can rely on and get used to. So it takes some time to get used to those standards, but because we're evaluating assignments that others have evaluated, we get a chance to see what others do and see how others evaluate and communicate about those things. And that's part of the commitment that's necessary as tutors. So I think that gives a good overview of how assignments are graded, how they're evaluated, how scores are determined, and so on. And there's a detailed article on the Help Center that explains this. If you go to classicalliberalaarts.com/help and just search for how are assignments graded in the Academy, you'll see the article where I explain all of that scoring system and those 3 criteria in detail. And I recommend you check that out and sort of keep that before your eyes when you're evaluating student work. Now, as for how to begin grading student assignments, I need to approve of an individual to grade assignments in a course. So no one is able to just start grading assignments. And I'm only going to approve someone to help as a tutor who has been studying in that course and who I know understands the lessons because I've evaluated his or her work. So if you're interested in helping as a tutor with evaluating student work, the first thing to do is study the course yourself, demonstrate your understanding of the lessons, and then let me know you'd like to help. If you're receiving good scores from me, if you're receiving 100s on your assignments, you can be pretty confident that you have my approval for the lessons, obviously, but also that you'd be able to assist in evaluating other student work. Sometimes a student's work might not be as good as yours, but it's still worthy of 100. So we've got to be careful with standards. But if you're enrolled in a course and successfully moving through lessons and you're interested in helping with tutoring, simply let me know. What I'll do is I'll give you assistant teacher or tutor access to a course, and on the course page, a box will pop up on the right menu that will show assignments that have been submitted. And you can simply open those assignments, review the student work, and give a score. And I'll provide detailed instructions on how to do all that. But it's very simple. It's simply a matter of me granting someone on the study center tutoring permissions for a specific course. I'll only approve specific courses. And then when you open that course page, you'll see those assignments that are waiting to be graded. So if assisting as a tutor with grading assignments is attractive to you, like I said, study the course that you'd like to help with, and let me know if you're working successfully through the course. Let me know you'd like to help with grading, and if everything looks okay, I'll grant you permission to help with grading. Now, the reason why help with grading is so significant is because we offer grading for assignments for anyone subscribed to our student plan. And that costs only $25 a month. So it relies on volunteer work. I don't get paid to grade student work when students are subscribed to the student plan. They're barely paying for access to the curriculum. They're paying only $25 a month. It's really volunteer work. It's work done to help students who are studying and submitting work. And even beyond that, as we promote the parish enrollment program, which is allowing parish children to enroll for free when priests take initiative in organizing education, we're giving them assignment grading service at no cost at all. So it's voluntary work. And that's true for me as well as for anyone who wants to help with tutoring. We don't get paid for this kind of work. Now, if you're wondering if there's a way for you to earn some money by helping students, the answer would be through tutoring, through scheduled and paid tutoring sessions. So you would actually arrange with a parent to provide some tutoring help through, let's say, a Zoom meeting with a student. And those opportunities will only be available to tutors who already prove themselves helpful to families through normal tutoring activities, which are voluntary. And you'll find that if you're actually good at your work as a tutor, as a volunteer, you'll find that parents will contact you and ask you to help with paid tutoring. That's how I got into tutoring myself. I was just teaching students as a school teacher, and parents began to approach me or email me or call me and ask me if I'd be willing to work privately with their children, usually because they trust the person, and secondly, because their child has expressed liking that person. So you've got to develop relationships with students. You've got to gain the trust of students. And if you do that, normally parents can see that. And when the parents see that their children have a certain good relationship with a tutor, that's the tutor that they'll seek out for more help. And you have to earn that opportunity. But the work of tutoring is a work of mercy. To instruct the ignorant is a work of mercy. It's not something that we're to try to exploit and turn into a way of making tons of money. And you've got to be careful that you don't try to use this as a way to make money, because the students have no money. And the parents of the children in the academy are at what for most of them will be the poorest place in their life. And you can't hold them hostage and demand a ransom from them to help their children. Helping children is a work of mercy. And you've got to be willing to do it as a volunteer, or I simply have no interest in having you involved, because we don't need this like crowd of hungry wolves looking to try to make money off children through Christian education. We're trying to make the program more and more affordable. We're trying to do things as generously as we possibly can. And we often have people coming in looking at it as a way to make some money. And the Classical Liberal Arts Academy is not a way to make money. So tutoring work and grading is voluntary work. And I hope that that's clear up front. So if you're interested in this sort of work, helping by volunteering to grade student assignments and help students in classical Catholic studies, you've got to be an exemplary student yourself. You've got to prove your own understanding of the lessons in the course, and then you've got to express an interest in helping. Obviously for us, the more qualified, competent tutors we can get, the better. And I'm hoping to have a whole army of generous, intelligent, faithful Catholic tutors available for these kids who are working through these courses, because they need our help and encouragement, and it's very important Catholic work for us to do. I hope this overview of assignment grading is helpful. If you've got any questions, please get in touch and let me know, and I'll answer them all in detail. God bless.